All right, listen, marriage is beautiful, but marriage is also hard work. So if you're in a marriage thinking about getting married, there are some things that I wish I knew before I jumped in. So in today's video, I want to talk about 6 pieces of marriage advice that I wish I knew earlier, so you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did in my marriage. And trust me, a lot of people are against number 4, but number 4 may be the thing that saves your marriage. So we're going to dive in 6 things I wish I knew about marriage earlier. Hey, welcome to RelationShots. If this is your first time hanging out with us, don't forget to download your free guide to intimacy. You'll see a link in the description area below. This will help you walk through 4 areas of intimacy in your marriage: physical, emotional, spiritual, and recreational, and give you some practical ideas how you can increase connection starting this week. So there are some things that when I got married, I kind of felt like, some people didn't tell me some stuff. Or maybe if we had covered this in premarital, I would have been set up for a little more marriage success, and it wouldn't have taken me 10 years to figure out all the things I was doing wrong and begin implementing some new habits, some new behaviors to help me do it right. So in this video, I want to cover 6 very simple pieces of marriage advice that I wish I had known going in so that I wouldn't have had so many problems. And hopefully this will save you some time. So thought number 1 is just that communication is everything, really. And don't assume, ask. Because I think what we were doing in our marriage, and a lot of couples do, is you communicate poorly because you are assuming that the other person should know what you want, or you're assuming that you know what the other person wants, and then we don't have conversation about it, right? So listen, we all know communication is important, but how critical it is, I think sometimes we don't know. And so early on in our marriage, we just assumed. I assumed I knew what you were thinking. She assumed what she knew I was thinking. We assumed we knew what each other needed. And so a lot of times we were not having the conversations in the relationship that we needed to have. And not only that, but I would also say one of the mistakes we made that was we allowed different types of conversations to overlap each other. And what I mean by this is if I categorize 3 types of conversations in marriage, it would be calendar conversations, right? Logistical stuff, who's doing what, who's picking up the kids, what appointments we have this week, who's paying the bills, calendar. I think we have connection conversations. That's all of what we did in the dating process. That's hanging out, building friendship, getting to know each other. And then we got conflict conversations. That's where we're resolving problems, we're resolving conflict, we're addressing issues in a relationship. And we didn't know to keep those 3 things separate. And so oftentimes we'd be on a date night trying to have connection, and we'd bring up a conflict conversation and ruin a connection time. Or we allow calendar conversations to come in when we should have been focused on connection. So one of the mistakes we made was just not dividing those 3 things up and allowing those 3 things to just overlap, intertwine, and they ended up ruining one another. So we weren't effective in any one of the 3 because we were keeping them all intertwined together, right? So don't assume. Instead, ask regularly, speak regularly about what you need and what you want in the relationship, because curiosity is your friend. One of the greatest aspects that you can bring to your communication in your relationship is curiosity. Even when they say something, don't assume you know exactly what they're trying to say or what they're implying. Don't just assume, but actually ask and get clarification on that thing. Be curious about what your spouse is sharing with you, and communication will get better. So that was one thing that I think we sort of knew, that communication is important, but I don't think we knew how vital it was and how we were messing it up by making assumptions and by not being intentional about when we were having what types of conversations. Thought number 2 that I wish I had known was if somebody had told me, don't sweat the small stuff. Now you get into marriage and it feels like you begin having battles over everything, and instead of picking your battles, you make everything a battle and everything a hill to die on, because when I think about the long term, I can't be doing this for the rest of my life for another 30, 40, 50 years. So you know what? I need to take care of this. We need to address this. We got to make sure that nothing we don't want in a relationship is going on. And so you begin nitpicking over everything. But what we didn't understand was, there's a lot of small stuff. And it's easy to get caught up in the petty disagreements. And trust me, in our relationship, we fought about some stupid things. But when you let those little things snowball, that's when it causes unnecessary tension. So most marriages have one person who cares about way more things than the other person. Am I right? And you know which one you are. So this could get lopsided pretty quick because one isn't bringing up a whole lot because there's not a whole lot that they care about or are concerned about or have issue with. The other one's bringing up seemingly everything, and it gets lopsided. And it's like, dang, every time I talk to you, there's an issue. Every time I talk to you, it's something different. And so there will be things in a marriage that you just got to grieve and let go and quit sweating the small stuff. It's the same thing we get with parenting, right? We're frustrated with the kids. They left their stuff here, and there's another dish in the sink, and there's this, and there's this, and they're so loud, and they don't put things back. And you know what? There will come a day when your house is quiet, when there's no dishes in the sink, because your kids have moved out. And in those moments, you know what you're going to wish? Well, depending on how terrible your kids were, but most of the time you'll be like, it's kind of quiet around here, and I kind of miss them. And I would probably take a dish in the sink and some shoes by the door so that I could have my kids around again, right? So there's small stuff that we sweat both in marriage and with parenting. And so what we've got to do is we just got to learn to let things go. If it's not a big deal, move on. Save your energy for the important conversations like how to handle big life changes, dreams for the future, the issues we really got to deal with. Save the energy for what's important and learn there's a lot of small stuff that feels like big stuff, but isn't. And if you're the kind of person that everything is big and there's no small stuff, then we probably need to have a conversation and evaluate what really is important in life, what isn't. Because there's a big difference between relational needs and relational wants. And a lot of the conflict and fight you're having are around wants, and you may need to just stop sweating the small stuff in order to have a great relationship. A third piece of advice I wish I had known was that you don't have to agree on everything, but you do need respect, right? So I like peace, and so I kind of felt like, man, if we disagree and if we're disagreeing on too many things, at some point, this is not going to go well. So we've got to figure out how to be in agreement. We got to like the same things. We got to want the same things. We got to agree on the same things. We can't have too many different opinions, because if we have too many different opinions, at some point, there's going to come a time where this is not going to go well. And so I used to think that way, but the reality is that's unrealistic. My wife and I disagree on lots of things, and guess what? That is okay. Listen, we didn't know early on how important it is to understand we are going to have differences and learn that the key to it is not trying to have the same opinions or the same things or agree on everything, but we need to learn how to respect even if you don't agree. You need to learn how to find value in your spouse's thoughts, ideas, opinions, even if you don't agree with them, right? That's called respect. So the key to a healthy relationship is not always agreeing. It's called mutual respect. That there's some level of equality in our relationship and we respect one another. And that means we're listening to one another. That means we're validating each other's feelings, that we're working together to find a compromise when possible. And when not, we're looking for opportunities to submit to one another, to give the other what they're desiring, to show that we're willing to sacrifice and serve at moments, and it doesn't always have to be whatever we want in the relationship. So we don't have to have the same opinion, but you do need to show respect for one another and one another's opinions. There's nothing that'll tear up a relationship quicker than if one person begins to feel like their opinions, their perspectives, and their ideas are not valued by their spouse. At some point, they're going to decide, why do I need to share these? Because they're never going to be valued anyway. A fourth piece of advice I wish I had known earlier, and this is a piece of advice that I think a lot of people push back on, and that's this. It's okay to ask for help. Listen, therapy is not a, quote, last resort, or shouldn't be. Neither is getting a mentor couple. Neither is using some outside friends or some outside wisdom to help you in your relationship. We bought into this thing that we should get married, we should know what to do, and if we're meant to be together, we should have this great relationship and we should be able to figure things out. That's not reality. What's going to happen is there are going to be times in your relationship when things get tough, and asking for help should not feel weird or awkward or like something's wrong with you. It's not a sign of weakness. See, some people think that therapy is for couples who are at the breaking point and they can't do anything else, and if they don't get some help, it's not going to work. But you know what? It can strengthen an already good relationship and prevent you from getting to a place of crisis, right? So therapy is not just for emergencies. If you're struggling with communication, if you're struggling to handle conflict, if you're struggling to adjust to new life stages like having children or moving or aging parents or different jobs, you know what? Seeking help early can prevent bigger issues down the road. So don't be afraid to ask for guidance. It's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of commitment, right? And there's no way that you should walk into a marriage knowing everything that needs to be known about being in a marriage, about having a healthy marriage, about building a great marriage, and about living with some person who is not you. So therapy is not a last resort. It should be okay to ask for help. A fifth piece of advice that I wish somebody would have told me is that personal growth shouldn't stop after marriage. I think a lot of times we're like, you hear things like, be the person that you would want to marry and work on, and I think we should do that. And I think we should heal as much as we can before we get married. And I think we should grow and have a commitment to a pattern of growth in our relationship before we get married. But when you get married, is not, I've crossed the finish line, I'm good. And I think early on in marriage, it was kind of like, well, you liked who I was when I came into marriage, and so I probably don't have a whole lot of pressure to grow now or to put my best foot forward, right? That feels kind of like the dating process. I got to present myself well. I got to be good in certain areas. I got to be relationally friendly. I got to make you enjoy moments with me and trust me, because then we can get married. And once we're married, then all that other personal stuff stops. But the reality is it doesn't. And if you falling into the trap of just do life together and we'll be great. Listen, marriage is about growing together and as individuals. One of what I believe are 3 pillars of marriage are community, intentionality, and personal responsibility. Personal responsibility means I have both a relational responsibility to care for my spouse, but also a personal responsibility to the marriage to continue to work on me so the best me is showing up in the relationship, that I'm not expecting my spouse to have to go through the growing pains of me trying to figure out my stuff because I'm not willing to grow. And guess what? Marriage is going to force me to be in situations that cause me or need for me to grow in order to be able to show up. So don't lose sight of your individual dreams, your individual passions, but also your individual growth when you step into a marriage. So maybe a hobby, maybe a career goal, personal development, personal healing. We want to support each other's growth in the relationship as individuals as we grow as a couple. But I have a responsibility to show up and continue growing so that my marriage can continue growing as well. So the wedding day is not the end of personal growth. It is the beginning of continued journey of personal growth in a relationship. I've got to be focused on growing individually and growing as a couple. I think the last piece of advice that I wish I knew earlier was just be prepared for change. Like, marriage is not static. I think I thought to myself, listen, hey, once we get going and we figure out how this marriage thing is done and we figure out what works for us, we'll be good for the rest of our marriage. But the reality is that every new season, new jobs, moving, having kids, adjusting to each other, health changes, hormonal changes, all these different things in life that we did not know and could not account for when we got married that will be caused by the seasons we go through. Listen, we are going to have to change in our relationship, which is why communication is so important. We should regularly be asking one another, what are your greatest stressors right now? What is something I can do to take some responsibility or weight off your shoulders? We need to keep asking questions and keep being curious, because as we go into different seasons and different stages of life, we have different needs and things do not stay the same. And what worked in one season of marriage may not work in another season of marriage. What kept you connected in one season of marriage may not keep you connected in another season of marriage. We are consistently and constantly changing in marriage. And so even if you're in a good place, don't assume the good place will last forever. There's going to be changes that will cause you to have to revisit and readjust and make new changes to maintain the quality of relationships. That's one of the reasons that, number one, communication is so important, is that, listen, marriage and life are continually changing. And so we've got to be open to adjusting the relationship through the different life transitions. And we can't come back to, because I know a lot of couples that do this, they're like, well, you said that you valued X or that you wanted X, but now we're 15, 20 years in and you're saying something else. Okay, they didn't lie to you. They've evolved and developed. You've evolved and developed. And sometimes things that we wanted in our 20s are not of interest to us in our 40s. Some things that were of value to us in our 30s are not going to be of value in our 50s. And so we're going to have to reevaluate our goals, our priorities, the things that are most important to us, and how we connect during different seasons of life will change. So flexibility is going to be key to staying strong through the ups and downs of relationships. So those are 6 pieces of advice that I wish I had known a little earlier, that would have saved me probably a lot of growing pain and a lot of heartache along the way. I would be curious to know which piece of these 6 pieces of advice do you wish you knew earlier, or you're grateful that you know now, or maybe it's some other marriage wisdom that you want to share with us. Drop that in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Let's continue to have a conversation about it. And until next time, I'll see you right back here on RelationShots.